Hi, my name is Melissa Trinidad, and I'm here to share my experience with you growing up as a first-generation American Filipino. I want to share this experience with you because I think there are people out there who've gone through similar things that I have gone through growing up, and I think it's important to be able to relate to somebody in that position who might find themselves there now and let them know that it will turn out to be okay as long as there's love in your heart and you have a good family. So speaking of my family, that's where, all of this stemmed from, is when my parents moved here in their 20s in the 1960s from the Philippines. They met in Montana, of all places, big sky country, and two Filipinos, finding love there and having children. And eventually, growing up, we lived in a town in West Virginia, a very small coal miners town. So being Asian American in a coal miners town with maybe, two other Filipinos was a real challenge in itself. But growing up culturally within my household was even more difficult. I have an older brother, and in the family culture, in the Filipino culture, boys are generally allowed, to be free about their choices, the friends that they make, the things that they do, because they're looked upon as, these are the men, and it wasn't constricted as it was on me, being a female and the young one in the family. So growing up, it was really hard for my parents to see me make decisions for myself. And eventually, as a teenager, that's when it came to a head, because I was growing up surrounded by American kids who were doing basketball games and football games and socials and dances, and I was left standing on the sidelines because my parents weren't allowing me to do those things because they felt they were inappropriate, where I just wanted to meet people, grow socially, and interact. So being a teenager and living with my mom under that roof, we definitely butted heads on several different topics. Not only was I confined to not being able to do things socially with friends, I was really pushed to compete academically and on a sports basis. So I played tennis basically every single day competitively throughout my adolescence and into my college years. So that definitely took up all the social time that I had in high school. And it was really hard for me because I wanted to experience things that other regular teenagers got to do, going out with their friends, going out to baseball games, high school basketball games, and things like that. But my parents were really strict on me, and they didn't allow me to do those things, like I said. So I was pushed, but it finally came to a point where I didn't want to be pushed anymore, and I started to push back and rebel. So I started hanging out with what they would probably consider, most people would probably consider, not the right crowd, maybe the party kids. But I think that was due to the fact that I didn't have the chance to socialize with a wide variety of kids. So the ones who were most welcoming and seemed to be the most fun were the ones that I gravitated towards when I finally had enough of being suppressed and I wanted to push back. So I pushed back pretty hard and started being irresponsible with my schoolwork, with my tennis, and eventually this led to me running away from home the summer before my senior year of high school. And I ran away to a little town called Yellow Springs, Ohio, home of Antioch College, which is a very progressive and liberal college that you may have heard of. So I lived there in Yellow Springs for 2 months out of my summer, the summer before my senior year. And I was just messing around. I was teaching tennis, I was hanging out, I was doing all kinds of things that I wouldn't approve of as a mother now that I find myself in that position. But those were the things that I did. And one day when I was walking downtown of that little sleepy hippie town, I noticed a whole slew of police cars, which was out of the norm for that area. And I realized as I walked up closer to the group of police cars and the police standing out there, I saw that my parents were standing with that group, and I realized that they had come to get me. So that's eventually how I ended up coming back home to finish off my senior year of high school at yet another different high school where I didn't know anyone again. But I finished off, and at that point, I had received numerous tennis scholarships, and I declined them all. and I decided to go to a 2-year community college because I had no clue at this point in time what I wanted to do. And of course, this drove my parents insane. And I moved out the day that I graduated high school. I didn't attend the ceremony. I went out, I got my own apartment. I got a job slinging coffee, which was great. And I was playing tennis for a 2-year school. At this point in time, my parents and I were at a total head, not communicating. They told me that they were going to move out of Ohio, that they were moving to Florida, and I said basically, peace out. I'm living my life. I haven't experienced things because of you, and I will maybe be in touch. So there was about a 2-year period where my parents and I didn't speak, and during this time, when I was going to school, playing tennis, things just kind of spiraled way out of control for me. I was partying a lot, not keeping up with my studies, letting my coaches down on the tennis team, letting my teammates down, but still thinking to myself that I was experiencing life. I finally realized, I do need to have more discipline. And the discipline that I had before from my parents might have been too much, but it was instilled in me that was the right track, and the track that I was going down that I thought that I had to go down wasn't exactly the right one either. So I needed to combine the two. I needed to enjoy life, live it to its fullest, but understand that I needed a direction. And that direction led me back to calling my parents and saying, you know what, I need to be around you. I need to be close to my family. So at that point, everything was put aside, all the things that we had experienced, because they were over the top with the way they disciplined me. In the Philippines, it's all right to smack your kids around and to, I'm not saying that they beat the living hell out of me, but they definitely carried on to a degree that I would never, decide to punish my child by that kind of physicality. So anyways, all that put aside and all the disrespect that I shown them, we put that aside, and I decided to load up a giant U-Haul, tow a car behind it, throw my cat in the car, and I had like $200 in cash, just enough money to barely make it to Florida. And when I arrived in Florida, it was like 4 a.m. My parents came out to greet me with open arms, and I literally came out of that U-Haul and kissed the ground. And from that point on, we just moved forward. So I got my degree at USF. I didn't start playing tennis again. I did leave that behind. But then also what eventually happened, which was not planned, was that I became pregnant. So that is another, that was another bombshell to my parents, and a bombshell to me because that wasn't something that was planned, because I was only 24 years old at the time. However, the birth of their granddaughter, the birth of my daughter, brought us even closer together. And not only did it bring us closer together as a family, I think it was an eye-opening experience, a learning experience for myself. Those experiences basically molded and gave me the guidelines of, this is how I want to communicate with my daughter. This is how I want to raise her. I want to make sure that I can prepare her as much as possible for what's out there, what happens in the dynamics of relationships between people, and be better prepared and know that I don't have to parent exactly the way my parents parented me, but I'm going to take all the good things that they did and instill them for my daughter. And to this day now, my parents and I are basically we're inseparable. We speak all the time, and I'm very proud of my Filipino heritage. And there are things that I pass on to my daughter that I want her to be aware of, and I never want our Filipino heritage to be lost. My daughter's American Filipino. She's half white, she's half Filipino, and I want her to have the best of both worlds. And I'm glad that I was the one to experience being first-generation American, because I think it is a struggle to find that balance, to understand and appreciate your heritage, but at the same time, embrace the culture that you're living in. And I think that's the problem that my parents had, is that, obviously they wanted to come to America. A lot of people want to come to America. There's a reason why people want to come here, but there's also a cultural difference that you have to learn to accept as a first-generation American, and these are the things that, these are struggles that aren't written about in textbooks. These are struggles that you have to experience yourself, and how you come out of it will determine whether or not, the course of how you parent, the course of how you live your life. And I think I found that balance. And although it might have been a very difficult one growing up as an adolescent, I definitely feel as an adult now, it was worth it, and I would do it all over again just the same way. I'm very thankful.